on WebSharper itself. So like, he's probably one of the most knowledgeable people on the topic. So we're going to have a 1-hour talk-ish, which is also broadcasted on C4F Shop, by the way. So other people are actually with us tonight. And so I'm super excited to have Anton tonight. Thanks for speaking.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be here. Excited to see you guys. This really will be an introductory talk. I'll try to go very slowly, and usually I fail to make things simple, so just stop me if something. if I'm just going too far, or just I'm not making myself understood. So making things simple is quite kind of difficult, right? Okay, so WebSharper. As Matthias told, I used to work for Intelifactory. My time was split between developing WebSharper, maintaining it, and also doing. Thank you. Duplicate, yeah. So my time was split between maintaining WebSharper, working on some new stuff, and also doing consulting for our clients because they're like a small shop. So some of our time I did consulting for other users of WebSharper. About 6 months ago, I moved to the Bay Area, and then now work for Tachyus with these guys across the table. So the plan for tonight, I'll just give you a quick intro what WebSharper is, what it does, then we'll go into code, and I'll show you some basics. We'll try to keep it short and then go into Q&A. So what is WebSharper? If you know about the alt.js systems, like something that tries to replace JavaScript, that's definitely one of them. So it's an F#-centric alt.js system, specifically suited for making web and mobile apps. The story behind it is that when I started at Intelifactory, we had some application for one of our clients that written mostly in F#, but front-end in JavaScript and bits of C#. C# methods extending to thousands of lines of C#. It was the worst time in my life. But I was trying to write this JavaScript, and I was making little stupid mistakes, like I was forgetting the number of arguments in the function, refactoring was impossible, everything was breaking. And we started looking at alternatives, and it looked like F# has this interesting feature called quotations, so we thought, why not transpile quotations and write F# instead. So we tried it. It kind of worked for us. We really liked it. Later it became kind of a product, and Intelifactory tried to push it as a closed source product, which didn't work so well. But this happened like around 2008. But we kept using it internally, and we kept improving it for ourselves and to use for our clients. And after a while, we released it open source with a copyleft license, and then finally, right after I left, Intelifactory released it open source with Apache license. So I guess if that was a stumbling block to you for like I'm not interested because it's not open source, now there's a check since like last October or something like that. Some of our clients included, of course, internal projects. Redo, there's a small shop from Canada. Microsoft Research used it for some things in computational biology. They had some sharp code, and they wanted to run it in the browser without changing it. They did have to change it a little bit, but WebSharper helped them do it. Some of Sport uses it. The University of Nebraska Medical Center is one of our clients, and we built something for them. And multiple consulting startups use it, especially small ones. Like people who really love it are like people who do full stack development, and they think in F# and they don't want to deal with JavaScript, but they have to. So it works. Yeah. One of the later projects that Intelifactory is doing is WebSharper Online ID. That's also in F#. Yes. WebSharper, yeah, is written in WebSharper for the most part, and F#, of course, in the backend. So, what are the most important features that we actually tried a lot of things, and some of them are kind of experimental, but the features that stood the test of time or like that bring the most value apparently are 3. The first one, of course, obviously, like you get F# code to run in JavaScript, and you can, to an extent, you can pretend that JavaScript doesn't exist. Now, I can tell you at once, like it's not 100% function, it's a partial function. So most things work, and some things don't work. And you can tell me, well, why do I care then? Because I want everything to work. But the reality of it is, if you get 80% to work without thinking about JavaScript, and in 20% of the cases you need to like do some hacks, that's much, much better than dealing with it all the time if you are the kind of guy who thinks in types. At least that's what we found out. So you can, besides using types, because besides having types, you have standard library in F#. So you have like comprehensions, sequences, maps, sets, dictionaries, hash tables, everything built in, and you can keep using that. And if you're already doing that and it's in your L1 cache because you're just using it on the backend, it's so much easier to keep using those same control and data structures as you can.
Question from Twitter: can you slow down tiny bit?
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I definitely can slow down.
So, do you have Netflix on? Netflix?
Yes. Good catch. Let's disable it. Yeah, please, yeah, keep. Oops, yeah. Oh, jeez. Anyone knows how to use this wonderful bar? Not good. Full screen. Oh, okay. You see it full screen. I don't. Okay, never mind. So yeah, you can use code. All you need to do is you can plug a little JavaScript tag on top of a module, and that everything is cross-compiled. Now, in the best case, it works in both places. So the same module, you can call it from F#, it will work, and you can call it from JavaScript, and it will work. And this kind of allows some neat tricks, and you can filter things. By the way, stopped passing this filter since yesterday. Specifically from F# core, well, the F# core is mostly covered, but there is some kind of corner cases. Like I'm not sure mailbox processor support is fully there. Cancellation on things work. Map sets, dictionaries, hash sets, yeah, like the main collections you would think of.
The dictionary is not really part of the F# core, so is it
well,
some...
it covers some, yeah, it covers some standard .NET libraries as well. And if you're missing something, there is a way to add support to it yourself, so you can keep using it. But yeah, but you need to really understand JavaScript to do it right.
Something is also part of the receive configuration. It's something is also part of when you receive it.
The objective is to see it at compile time, and as much as possible it doesn't, but I believe there are some corner cases where it leaks.
Another request from the internet is like, is it possible to repeat the questions?
Yeah.
Because people then cannot find them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's make it interactive if we can. So yeah, the idea that you can share code on the client and the server is probably people who use like Node, for example, they know a lot about it. But it's if you never used a system like that, it's kind of strange at first what you can do with it. But it buys you a lot of architectural flexibility. You can share types and you can seal them so that the representation of the type is hidden, and you control the access to the module using functions you expose, and it works on the client and the server, and yet these types are used in Interop to communicate. So basically, instead of splitting your whole architecture by this line, like we draw a line here between client and server, you're splitting it by models where it most makes sense for applications. So if you're making a chat application, that's a chat module, and internals of the chat module, client and server, live in one place, and they talk to each other using some internal protocol, and it's completely sealed off from the rest of the application. You can refactor that module without touching everything else. You don't like expose your guts to the rest of the app. At least that style of code I'm really missing now at Tachyus, where we don't have such a system. But it worked for us. You can also share domain logic to some extent if you get some kind of validation logic, or if you actually implement new data and control structures that work for your domain, or you implement something, then oftentimes it works. By data or control structures, I mean, for example, some kind of a new monadic builder or something like that, or whatever. A complicated algorithm that's just an algorithm you can run both places.
Does it, so if you create a builder, will it
Yes.
also on time?
Yeah, you definitely can create builders. By builders, we mean this. If you haven't seen computational expressions in F#, that a few of the built-in ones, like async, like here on the next slide, you'll see one. But you can also build them yourself, and that's supported to transpile by using JavaScript. The third feature that stood the test of time, really it's kind of simple and it's not very interesting, but it really saves you so many headaches that it's hard to even explain how important it is. the client-server interop is typed. So, yeah. So when you're calling something from the client to the server, you use types, and whenever you're refactoring, you get compiled feedback that something's changed, and you need to fix the client when you fix the server. This is actually what allows you to go very fast and to write few tests, or focus on testing what really needs to be tested, as opposed to testing this stupid thing like I forgot that this function now accepts 3 arguments instead of 2, so on, so on, so on. And unfortunately, once you get used to it and you go back to working in a regular environment, you're really in trouble because yeah, the client typically gets like a stray from the server, and if your test coverage doesn't cover those cases, then the client gives you a call and says everything's broken. So this feature is a little bit limited, maybe, in the sense that there is not every type can travel across the boundary, but we do support all primitive types, including like dates, date types, and a closure of you can construct tuples, you can construct arrays, lists, any kind of union on the record, or a combination thereof. Anything that can be flattened out travels across this boundary just fine. Functions do not travel. Well, it's actually an interesting question what it would even mean if you would allow closures to jump across a boundary. So how this works, again, just perhaps to give you some context, if you write this function, then the body will be executing on the server, but the call side will be on the client. So I'll be calling this from the client code, and the body will be executing on the server, and then the interop will handle it.
What about the quotation expression? Quotations?
Quotations cannot currently travel, but that's an interesting feature. It could probably build a few interesting things for that. That's an interesting extension to consider. We didn't try. Actually, I don't think you can even use at this point quotations in JavaScript, but it's not theoretically impossible. It can be an interesting feature to add.
You can use it instead of functions.
Not entirely, because quotations that are completely closed, you can, and they indeed can travel as data. But quotations that close over a value from your runtime system that is not necessarily serializable, that you like hold a handle to a file or something. How do you serialize that? It's not a it's a little tricky. Or else, if you construct a graph of every object that's reachable from a closure, you might end up, you wanted a banana, but you got the gorilla in the jungle and everything with it. And you don't want to serialize it and send it across the network. I think the company that plays this kind of games is Nessus and Embrace framework. They do it for distributed F-sharp computations. So probably they are the guys to ask how to do it properly. But we didn't really go into it. We just went for the basic thing. But surprisingly enough, this basic thing like saves you a lot of headaches.
What would the compounds down? What's the implementation before implementation?
The current implementation uses that. It uses JSON to do this. There are other implementations possible, and in one of the projects we were using something. We did not use SignalR directly, but we used something similar over WebSockets, and it didn't make it into mainline WebSharper yet, but it's definitely possible. And the nice thing about it, you can substitute it under the hood without touching your code. So you develop this, and then you have some other mechanism that does the same thing, kind of. Yeah. Why is async? I didn't explain, but yeah, otherwise it would be a blocking call, which is a no-no. Like if you're making the network request, then it may crash or it may wait a long time. So everything has to be async.
Because I wish I had said this is a new feature, but I wish you also support this is basically cool. For client right? If you would do this in the same very cool fashion, push.
Yeah, actually, in that project when we used WebSockets, we had it both ways. Yes. Yeah. So it is definitely like it's once you start using it, you think, oh, why can't they just call the client from the server in the same type of way? And you can. A similar mechanism would work. Just it's not in the mainline WebSharper yet. Again, like an interesting extension. So who does WebSharper really work for? Again, like if you're a full stack dev, it makes a lot more sense compared to if you just work on the client or the server. You need to like types and functional programming because otherwise, it will not make any sense. If F-sharp makes no sense to you, then of course WebSharper currently only works with F-sharp, so that's no. What it really buys you is the ability to deploy the backend on CLR, to use NuGet for libraries, to use Azure. If you really don't like those tools, then what's the point of using it, right? if you need running code in the browser or on a mobile device, we had a project that actually compiles code to JavaScript and uses something. We did not use PhoneGap, but we used our own homebrew version of it. But you could package it up in a mobile application and run the same code base everywhere, kind of. I mean, there's rough corners in there, but you do not have to rewrite the same application in multiple languages. Are you familiar enough with JavaScript to hate? Yeah, some people think JavaScript is the coolest thing, and they don't. When they look at WebSharper, they see that, oh, I could write it in JavaScript shorter, and why should I write it in a longer to satisfy the fact checker? Well, if you really are productive in that way, then that's fine. Yeah, so again, this people who are satisfied with the current web stack, who don't like types, who don't like FP, who like JavaScript, or people who actually are using some JS system, like if you're using ClojureScript or any of the other TypeScript, and you're really happy with it, then probably just keep enjoying that because all of the LJS systems are quite cool. So a lot of concern, at least I found in my company, was so who are these guys in the factory? Will this thing be around in 2 years? Will I actually pay attention? Well, the thing is that it has been around. If that's any predictor, it has been around since 2008. Into the factory, kind of the consulting business kind of depends on it. So we kind of used to get clients this way through WebSharper because they would hear that we built this, so they would come to us. So probably it has a few applications running and invested into supporting it. Now it is open source, so the community might make some improvements and start to do that. We do need a bigger community to actually make some stories much smoother. Some kind of boring stuff, like getting it to work on OS X correctly in monodevelop. I spent a few months doing that, and it's a nightmare because I don't know a thing about OS X or monodevelop, and so on, so on, so on. It's kind of things you really need a big community for to help you out, like streamlining the build and making sure it works. So there are some kind of rough corners out there. There is some good news. Hit F# and CLR this year that Microsoft changed their plans to kind of announce Linux support. So I'm hoping that WebSharper is like a bubble within the F# bubble. So an F# bubble is a bubble within the CLR bubble. So I'm kind of hoping that if all the bubbles grow, then there will be some trickle-down growth. And the factory has some plans to supporting C#. So if that happens, I'm not sure what the timeline for that is, but if that happens, they're probably going to get a lot more attention because honestly, F# users are a factor of 2 orders of magnitude less than C# at this point. So yeah, let's finally give it a go with some code. And I'll be using Visual Studio because that's what I am most comfortable with. Yeah. So first of all, how do I uninstall it and what does it see? Oh, you don't see it. Oh, that's annoying.
Oh, I know what it is.
You can shut it down. Which key combination did you use before to project this screen? We need to speak. Yeah, it's a feature. All right, so why does it even install something and how to install it? For the most part, it's distributed via NuGet, but we do install some Visual Studio templates. So this is what you actually need to install. So first of all, let me remove it here. Here's WebSharper. I remove it. Remove it, done. Nothing is there anymore. To restart Visual Studio. So go to WebSharper.com. Download the extension. Double click it. It's there. It should work with most editions of Visual Studio, including the freeware one. No, it's not. It's just a template. Like everything, all the binaries come from NuGet, and that's also your upgrade story. So you can, once you have the templates. This is a quick application I'll be using as a showcase later, but I might as well just show you how it works. I click compile. like 5 or so. Yeah.
Which one did you use for this particular application?
I'll show you. I'll show you right away. Let me first actually show you something else, if I can. Computer, I'll go faster. Actually, tough luck. On the last meetup, I showed this example. I had some people who were deeply familiar with game programming who told me I have no idea how to write games, and the logic is totally warped. And I haven't updated it, so that's probably still the case. And now I have more game experts. But this is a little artificial bird demo that I'll be going into it more later. So these artificial birds, they flock together, the Boids, and they are afraid of the mouse, as you can see. So that whenever I mouse around, they run away. Just a simple, silly graphic. So let's go through some basic templates. So I start Visual Studio, create a new project. Under Visual F#, you'll have a WebSharper section. It has a bunch of templates. And client-server web application is like the simplest one to get started with. So let's call it up. Ignore that, Visual Studio. Yeah, by the way, if anything doesn't work in this Visual Studio setup, frequently restarting Visual Studio makes it work again. I don't know why. I mean, it's been like this through multiple editions of Visual Studio, and yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, there's an app. So first it composed with F#, it composed with WebSharper, and it's kind of a web app. So if you run it, there's some kind of stuff in there. Yeah, really boring. So let's look at it. So the core stuff happens in the client module, and it's marked with JavaScript. And let me actually increase the code size a bit here, if I can. Is it better? Yeah. So once you mark something with JavaScript, the expectation is that it will either be only client-side code or it will be shared code. Either way, it's cross-compiled. So this is the method that gets called, and instead of using HTML, we are kind of using HTML-ish combinators inside F# that build up the HTML. So you can have a div.
Where is it called from? Is main just
I'll show you later. Yeah, it gets called from down there. There's multiple ways to organize it. But the only interesting part that really happens here, so we build a div, we put an input there. We could have moved this code down there, but the lat expression let us organize it in a way that makes sense for us. We put a label down there. We put a button with this text, and here we attach a handler to the button, and this is the handler. And when this handler does, it calls in this start function. Now this is the interesting part, because it's an async function, so it calls that async function, gets some data, and calls a continuation with the data. And here we start the async process. It forks a thread, kind of forks a thread. So we started with the input value. And the continuation is the label text is set to whatever gets returned from there. Now this function is actually, let's go to it. Yeah. This function is marked with the remote attribute, which makes it execute on the server. So again, we called it from the client as if it was an actual function, but it executed in F#. So if you needed to access database or something like that, you could do it here, and the data would travel back. Yeah, so far so good. One interesting aspect, like very simple but very useful aspect, is you can create libraries. I made a library here. And any kind of code, client code or shared code, can be shared as libraries, and it works pretty much the same way as .NET DLL. So once you build the DLL, it contains everything Sharp needs to know. You can put it on NuGet, you can share it with friends, you can basically structure your code as you would a .NET application. And the code that you structure is JavaScript code, shared code that runs in both, or else parts of your app. So it's really like orthogonal to your application. So if I wanted to move some functions here, I say like function, and mark it as JavaScript. I need to open the WebSharper namespace probably for this to happen. Compile it. I add a reference to this library. And lo and behold, we should be able to use this function from the client.
So even though you mark it as JavaScript, you can also call it from the server? Is there a way to call it? Okay.
Yeah, so long as you don't use any things that, so you don't create DOM nodes, you use the functionality that is only designed to work in JavaScript. It works in both cases. And actually, it's a design objective to maximize the amount of code that works in both places, because that's really what buys you the flexibility online.
But in order for it to work out in both places, it has to be annotated with this JavaScript.
Yep. Yep. So that the compilation also happens separately for whatever it's worth. So once you compile a library and somebody else is using this library, some other project is using this library, it's not recompiling it again. So it kind of saves work that way. You can browse for WebSharper libraries on NuGet. Yes, most of these are kind of boring, like typed wrappers around JavaScript libraries, but of various quality. Let's say that, because, but sometimes having even a basic or slightly leaky wrapper is better than trying to write from scratch. But I'll show you how to write it from scratch as well, because it's possible. But there are some libraries that are actually for WebSharper themselves, like formats. That's a native factory library we built. There's a bunch of stuff. This I think is by one of the guys who is not from Intel Factory, who's using WebSharper. So that's the way to build stuff for this system. You push it on. You have a WebSharper as either a name or a tag, push it there to NuGet, and people find it. Another place to look for is the WebSharper website. Has available components that list some of the things that Intel Factory is trying to maintain. Let's say that. Some of these ones we found to be like they're currently premium, but if you work with Cincha or XGS kind of JavaScript frameworks, then if you really hate JavaScript and you don't have a designer in your company and you just want to make like something that I just create an object that lists view and then populate it from code, and I don't care how it looks like, and it looks professional in the end. That's the one we found that worked for us the best. And we have some advanced WebSharper tooling to support their tooling. So with those two things, you can kind of forget about writing custom CSS and all that stuff. Yeah. Anyway. Yep, so that was libraries and the very basics. So how do we actually escape from F# into JavaScript if we don't want to? If you want to do something really simple. Suppose I want to call console.log function, and I don't want to find it in the WebSharper library because I don't care. I just want to call this stupid function, right? So in order to do that in F#, you need to tell WebSharper a type of function. So first, I'll create a function here, and I will not try to type like loosely typed. It accepts anything and it don't it, right? And it creates a unit. It returns a unit, it means void, like no, returns it, right? And I won't even try to implement it on the server. Then here I say inline. I put some JavaScript code. Now, what happens now? Now, if the server calls it, then of course this attribute doesn't do anything. You just get this behavior. Which usually you just throw an exception here to say like it's a mistake. Don't call this from the server, please. But if you call it from JavaScript, then instead of executing the body of this function, it executes the JavaScript you put in there. So this is how, if you're missing something or you have a sample online that tells you how, here's a sample that works in JavaScript and you want to plug it into WebSharper, here's what you do. Now, sometimes some people really kind of design JavaScript in a way that's kind of consistent with types. So you could look at what they're doing. They're not using types, but you could add types to it that makes sense. And those projects work very well as extensions to WebSharper because you add types once and then you actually have them. And then, so if you had a team of us, a couple of people, one guy would go out and do that, and the rest of the guys wouldn't have to read all the JavaScript docs. They would just use the types of WebSharper. It would work the first time. Now, some of the other libraries like T3 or something like that in JavaScript, they use idioms that are not like you can try to add types to it, but it's more pain than it's worth. So for those, like it doesn't really work that well. So then you can kind of find a balance of some sort, or just implement some application in JavaScript and plug it in like in one place like this. So let's try to call this guy. It's a little small, but we have it running here. So you can pass also functions back and forth and callbacks between JavaScript and WebSharper, so that all stuff works. You can also, we don't do that a lot, but you can kind of, you can find your WebSharper public code in here. You can find these functions. Some of them can be callable like that, but we don't really do that a lot. Like it's more of an anti-pattern, but it's possible if you really need to do that.
Can you show us the generated JavaScript for some of those simple functions?
No. The whole objective is to pretend that it's not there, and this product only works for you if for the most part you think about your app, you write it, and the first time it's 90% of the time it works, and sometimes it doesn't if you fix it. But if it doesn't work for 90% of the time, if it works for 60% of the time, and you need to use the debugger a lot, and it's not worth the pain to have the extra compile cycle and all that stuff. I mean, just use JavaScript. Some people really want to impose why don't you generate JavaScript this way? Why don't you generate JavaScript that way? I get kind of irritated about it, although Intel Factory is more supportive of that than I am. But I would say come on guys, you don't look at assembly code, right? If the compiler is leaky, then there's a problem. But if it works right, and you just compile something to IL, you don't really look at IL on a day-to-day basis, right? So yeah, there's some support for source path right now, but I don't know how to use it because I never used it, so I won't show that. So for the debugging, it's kind of works, but there's a cost. For how the JavaScript looks, it shouldn't matter as long as it does the right thing.
Question.
Yeah.
How would you build a component to add to an existing web app? Not my question, but.
I will definitely show that a little bit later, how to use Owen to if you have an Owen-based application, which most people do these days, I believe, how you can add the remoting handler from WebSharper to kind of add something to it. Of course, we also have support for legacy ASP.NET because that's what we started with, like ASPX pages, but I don't think people are very excited about this. Yeah. All right. There are some libraries that kind of bundled. So jQuery is one. So I guess I need to open it here. Open. So there's all the overloads of jQuery and stuff like that. If that's what makes it click. Yeah. So some people just use that and they don't even worry about this constructing DOM node and all that stuff. If you think in terms of jQuery, then just use it. I mean, that's fine. Yeah. Just use the remoting feature to get data into your client, and then use whatever you want to kind of display it. The other thing I wanted to show is actually using a library called Google Visualization, if I can. So let's try to use it via NuGet. Sorry for the small font size, but I'm writing here install package, WebSharper, Google Visualization, re-release because I'm using the latest WebSharper. They're just the guys are doing a 3.0 switch soon, so I'm just using this. Let's do that. So this downloads a library, adds it as a reference. Wait, hold on. Yeah, you get a bunch of stuff there. You get charts. Let me see if I had the example code somewhere in a different project, so I don't have to copy it from scratch. I don't. Never mind. Okay, let's try to go to the website. You'll need to annotate a JavaScript function if the module is annotated. All right. So apparently somebody just changed the binding to things. So these were floats. Now we make it ints. By the way, the floats and ints are represented in the same value in JavaScript. So it's more for information kind of in the APIs as far as WebSharper is concerned. Right. So we construct some kind of object that Google mandates you to use with their stuff. We could have constructed it from our server-side data, right? We could transform it, massage it. So let's actually do this chart here. Obligatory magic. So I'm embedding the initialization inside a tree-like DOM type. Oh, this is one. You could instead make it work in the main function and give it some kind of DOM element you found via jQuery or something like that. But I'm just for the fun of it, I'm using WebSharper composition here. So, and here, instead of our previous main, I just ignore all that. No, tough luck. Okay, this really worked yesterday, so I don't think I have time to debug it now, but probably the real reason is that I shouldn't be using alpha stuff. I should be using the production-ready stuff, but I got so excited that the guys were doing some long-needed refactoring there that I decided to show the alpha stuff anyway. Okay, let's move on to another topic. So we covered calling to and from JS, inline attributes, tree queries, and leaves. Yeah, okay. We covered the limitations of the client and server interop. I think. Okay, all right. So let's look at deployment options and address the question that we had. So when you create a new project, we just looked at this client-server web application that basically deploys by default on IIS and uses some Intel factory stuff called sitelets to build the website. The other one we looked at is library, that you can package your code in any kind of code inside. Extension, HTML application is just, if you want to forget about the server, just give me a completely HTML, CSS, JavaScript app. And you can also, of course, use libraries in it if you want to. So that's one deployment option. So you build it, you get the web package that you can show on the web server or and so on. If you want to run an existing application that uses Owin, then this is one template. But I don't think there is a template yet for it, but I believe one is coming. But this one uses Owin actually to self-host WebSharper. And there are two parts. One is responsible for hosting the RPC methods, the remoting methods that I showed you before. And the other one is responsible for making sitelet applications work. And some people really don't like sitelets, and right now that Microsoft is pushing Katana and stuff like that, that kind of makes it kind of redundant. So I had some success like setting up things that just set up the remoting handler and forget about all this other stuff. You get your JavaScript code and you get your ability to call it to the server topside FA, and you can plug it as an Owin thing onto an existing application, however you want to run that. Yeah. So it needs some tooling here, but it's definitely a possible story. I believe it's coming for Sharper 3 by now. So yeah, the extension one is. I'll just show you for the fun of it just how ugly it looks, the code looks. But I showed you before the inline way of binding to JavaScript. Now that kind of works for small things, but if you have 50,000 API members to bind, then you kind of run out of steam doing that using that mechanism. And instead, you start thinking, can I write a code generator to like scrap their website, find like browse documentation, or like do some fun stuff. So this is the framework that allows to do it that we used internally to build most of the bigger applications. Look at two-phase thing. So you define basically an AST transfers with stuff that describe the code and then it compiles to a binding. So if somebody uses a JavaScript pattern that they have their own understanding of what the class is, and they have some kind of a thing in there that you detect, you can make it into a function here, so you don't have to repeat the same thing again and again and again. And yeah. Most mortals don't use it, but it's there when you really need to make a big.
So where's the JavaScript
Hmm?
Where's JavaScript here?
This. Yeah, this JavaScript name, and this is the type that you want. It's I think a shortcut for a method. Yeah, there's a constructs a new method and so on. Yeah. You don't really have to use it much, but it's there. It's just to show you how we overdone the operator stuff. Don't do that. I mean, it partially comes from inexperience. I mean, as you gain experience, you realize, oh, users can define their own operators very easily. Just don't do that. Give them methods and documentation, and they will do that. But yeah, anyway, for example. All right. So let me move to TypeScript provider. Oh yeah, I attempted to build a TypeScript provider, and I know some people build something like that very quickly, and I couldn't. I spent a lot of time trying to build it. I think it's because I'm a perfectionist, and TypeScript really sucks. I mean, it's kind of impossible to construct a full map because the type system is what you call it? It's structural. TypeScript provider, TypeScript is another LGS language that people have written a lot of things that look like that are descriptors of what a JavaScript library interface is. So I tried to write something that would just use that in WebSharper, so you could just use those descriptors people have written to obtain a typed binding. And first of all, type providers unfortunately do not yet support generics. That kind of killed the whole point of it for me, but I still was trying to make it work with without type providers, but as a build thing that you can just build it and get the DLL. And that kind of worked, but TypeScript kept moving on, and maybe I'm just not a strong enough programmer to complete it. But I think the draft is still there inside the factory, and they want to make it work, but it's, yeah, maybe given my record of making simple things look complicated, maybe it's better to start from scratch and do it again. All right, so let me move to the Boids example that I quickly showed you in the beginning. So this is not really using client-server stuff or anything. It's just a simple, simple one-page app. So, but it does show some nice things with F#. So when you construct shapes, you can create your own abstractions, and you kind of can do that in JavaScript too. But I find it really nice to have type flows. So triangle is of type shape T or shape, and you can switch if you know a library that works in an imperative way. What, for example, takes a const ternary context to G. Don't make me read that again. And applies like mutators to it. You can slap a functional interface on top by deferring the calls to those functions, right? This is what I'm doing here. So instead of saying like draw something, I say here's the transforms that take a shape and take a two-dimensional vector and transform it by scaling and translating in the x direction or rotating, right? So triangle is a basic shape. That's just an equilateral triangle, I believe. Just cosine and sine and stuff like that. And to get those Boids, I just apply these transforms to move them in position and to make them the right size and so on. Right, and you kind of can do the same in an imperative way by calling the context functions. That's what I'm doing in the implementation. But this interface makes it composable. And the union of shapes takes a bunch of shapes and makes them shape, right? So
what was the type T on top?
T? Oh, it's just a shape type. I could probably better name it shape. Yeah. It's the camel stuff in me still.
Did you learn a camel first?
I learned Haskell first, and ever since then I was an unhappy programmer that everything sucks, except Haskell. But I kind of found jobs in F#, and it's kind of okay. So, all right. It's not a T anymore. I'm hoping we're not using that name anywhere. We're just letting type interface do its trick, so we just rename the type. We don't need to edit code. Okay, fine. So the fun part happens in the rules that actually define what these guys do, right? So center of mass rule makes them kind of go towards the center of the page. Otherwise, they would probably fly away, since they like to move, right? So we find points within some radius from one Boid. Oh, let me increase the font size again. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, finds points within. Just, I'm not trying to even optimize it. And again, game programmers will tell me I'm doing it all wrong. Steer to center rule. Center of mass rule. Okay, so steer to center was the one that tries to move towards 0. So I'm just multiplying the vector by a scalar, and 0 is the center of the screen in this model, right? Center of mass rule, sorry for confusing it, it's the one that actually makes them flock. So one bird looks at birds close by, and center of mass for those guys, which is the average of these vectors. I'm using the unit of mass for every single one, and then it moves there. So the vector difference between the center and position is Boid, and some kind of factor that makes it a weight factor. Repulsion is applied to the mass to run away. Right? So keep away rule is essential for Boids, otherwise they will flock to fly exactly in the same place. So this is actually from the original Boids model. Like they need to, if they're too close, they need to try to steer away from each other. So this is the keep away rule. So again, finds Boid within like very close, and then just some vector math here. Match velocity is another essential thing for them to flock. Like they try to, when they're flocking and they're flying in the same direction, they try to, if the velocity they didn't try to do this, then they would kind of get away from each other and rotate. Yeah, a time step takes some Boids and does some transforms. Move. Here's the one that actually draws them, right? It takes a Boid to a shape that we just renamed from a T. It probably helps to understand it. So we take a triangle, we scale it so that instead of an equilateral triangle, it's actually pointed. Right? We align it to the velocity vector so that it rotates, and then we shift it from the center of the screen where it would have been otherwise to the position. That's it, right? And void set shape takes a set of voids, and for all of them applies that optics union, right? The init does some randomization to put a bunch of them on the screen. And here's an animate function on every tick. It takes the state transition for the system, and draws it. Yeah, and I built some helper stuff to actually go from the simple functions to a running system, right? And you can, so if something is missing, you can build a nice wrapper. So vectors math is here. It's not very interesting. Unfortunately, WebSharper doesn't do the operator overloading. I hope it's coming because it's really, really nice. But without operator overloading, you have to kind of do this funny looking operators to do vector math. Nothing interesting here. Here's a little utility I built for doing the animation, tracking the mouse, and so on, and providing a simple interface. But you just provide this kind of function on move and on tick, and then it draws it everything else for you. So with this, you can build many little game-like things, right? Or if it stops working for you, you can build these things like shop. So client just uses this helper functions to in the Boids model. Yeah, I'll send a link. I'll attach the link to the code editor so that if people want to play with it, it's going to be there. But if you have any questions or comments on how games are not programmed this way, look at this. Yeah, that is pretty much all of. Oh yeah, you can also play with these guys or tweak the code to make them do something else. There is pretty much everything I could push into today's presentation. There's a bunch of kind of some experimental stuff with WebSharper called formats and UI next that there's just simply no time for. But it's kind of interesting, so we'll see if there's just going to be another time to talk about it, or just talk to me afterwards, and I'll be happy to go into those details.
So, how do you integrate the WebSharper integration application?
A single page application will probably be just compile to a JavaScript file pretty much. So you can do whatever you want with that.
Is this in the remote attribute?
Oh, with the remoting? For that, you just, again, probably it's, since the tooling is not there, I definitely done it. Just talk to me afterwards, or if you really need to do it, we'll make tooling for it in my spare time.
Let's say you can follow like REST services with C# and you're comfortable with remote.
REST services are a very bad idea in the first place, and you can. I mean, it's a disaster. The time spent in discussing how we're going to do the REST services compared to just writing the stupid signatures and going forward is incredible. So I'm being a little bit of a soup Nazi here by saying that, but if you want to integrate an existing REST service in a typed way, you're basically writing a client. And some people do it, right? So there's some C# clients for like Azure REST services. So you have to do that work for WebSharper provide types, and you can do that, and you can implement it with HTTP request calls or whatever. Like you with JavaScript with types. But if you can avoid doing that, if you're designing something new, it's much better if you start with types and you generate the client and server together, so you don't have to do this extra like huge work to maintain two pull requests and so on and so on.
But you might want to take into account that really
the world is a jungle and it's a terrible place to live. I don't know how to do with that actually. I'm sorry. I hope I can. I wish I had a story for you, but the reality is, I worked in a shop full of nerds before, and I just start to realize how things are like in the real world, and I don't know how to deal with it either. So it's probably difficult.
What is this thing was called background? Can you do all kind of interceptions?
There's a couple of you can do interceptions. A couple of hosts. One original host was like a module into that you plug into IIS, and now we also have one that plugs into O in pipeline. And it definitely needs a little bit of work to allow customization stuff, but it's there. You probably should have one based on SignalR, but we don't.
There's no other than the unique.
Yeah.
So you can define method that you can exactly observable. I think it's important.
Yeah, that would be actually very cool to do this. Yeah. Really cool weekend project to try to do that. It should not be very difficult. Given some plumbing is already there, we just need to plug in the transfer. So this is the example from the new Next framework. I guess I don't really have time to talk about it.
Question, like in that space, the other project I heard a lot about was a ClojureScript, which must be fairly different because it's not coming from the. I'm assuming the biggest benefit from WebSharper is like types everywhere. Did you play with ClojureScript, and do you have any comments on maybe how they would compare, like what you would get from one versus the other?
I have played with Clojure when it was just beginning and Rashid was running around trying to solve the everyone. And I looked at it and it didn't have a let track and there was no tailcalls. And since then, seen a lot of smart people use ClojureScript to great advantage. So I probably will play with it someday. I haven't yet. But you definitely don't get types.
Yeah, I should look at ClojureScript. That's important question. It's impossible to read.
No, I'm just curious because I can see the upside on this side. Is like if I get types, I get something clearly good. So it's like I'm wondering if ClojureScript, if the benefit is just because you want to write Clojure, or if there is anything you get out of this which you probably wouldn't get out of WebSharper.
Well, I think in any case, if you are a single dev working on both sides of the boundary, like a content server, having one standard library to keep in your head and one way of doing things in any language is a huge advantage. I would even say that if you don't use WebSharper, like try one of those systems, like try Node or something, and just write JavaScript everywhere. Well, JavaScript is terrible, but having one language is. I mean, we can say we are polyglot programmers and so on, but after having 7 years of WebSharper experience, every time I try something else, even if it's better, I'm like, I'm not efficient.
But it still doesn't really solve the CSS problem. So. Element sort of claims to.
XGS kind of solves the CSS problem. You just don't think about it. You compose widgets and they look nice. Any other questions?
Your experience of writing that providers you can find?
I really tried type providers. I tried to like them. I think I'll wait until they support generics because I use generics all the time, and if they can't generate generic code, then I can. So most of the code generation I've done was of the boring variety that was just executable. That does something and produces a DLL you can later use. So I think that support is coming for generics that whether support should be looking at it again. Dimitri here knows all about it. If you need someone to tell you how to write that project.
Cool. Then maybe let's give a hand for it. And then I guess like if people want to stick around, and I guess either here or outside, like whatever you prefer, like let's chat. And if you want to go home and don't want to stick around, that's fine too. Cool.
Yeah, help yourself to more beers, more food. Take some sunglasses if you want.
More stickers.
So now that it's after your talk,